Have you ever felt like there was something in your house that wasn't supposed to be there? Sometimes, you don't need to hear a scream or see a shadow to know something's wrong, just that sudden chill on the back of your neck, that thick silence that creeps in with the dead of night. Some stories don't start with thunder or abandoned houses. They begin with an object, seemingly harmless, small, handcrafted, carved in wood, and holding something not from this world. In this account, you'll hear a story that feels ripped straight from a nightmare, but for the person who lived it, it was terrifyingly real. An ancient sculpture, delivered with no explanation, gradually taking over the house with its sinister presence. Nighttime noises, nightmares, apparitions, and an ever-growing sense of psychological terror form part of a cycle that has repeated itself for centuries. A mystery wrapped in occultism, ancient traditions, and a darkness that refuses to stay buried. If you think this is all just a bit much, be careful. Many others thought the same, right up to the moment they woke up and realized the idol had moved. If you've ever had an unexplained awakening in the middle of the night, this story might be more than just entertainment. It might be a warning. And remember, some stories don't just want to be told, they want to continue. And sometimes, all they need is a curious reader willing to open the door. It all began on a typical afternoon, the kind that promises boredom. The protagonist, just an average man, really, someone like any of us, was wandering through a local antique market to kill time. Among old books, dusty portraits, and vintage radios, something caught his eye: a small wooden sculpture, rough in appearance, carved with unsettling detail. The seller didn't know much about it. Came in during a trade, he said, almost like he didn't want to talk about it. The man bought it, not knowing why. Something about it just called to him. The sculpture was strange: a twisted human-like face, arms raised as if frozen mid-ritual. The wood was heavy, darkened by age, covered in carvings he couldn't identify. He brought the idol home, thinking it would just be another odd decorative piece, something guests might call exotic. But that was when the first invisible thread began to form. That night, walking past the bookshelf where had placed the idol, he felt a sudden wave of discomfort, like he was being watched. Over the next few weeks, he noticed something else. No one else liked the idol either. Visitors said it gave them bad vibes. A friend joked that it looked cursed. He laughed it off, assuming they were being dramatic, but the doubt had been planted. Why had he chosen that object out of everything in the market? Maybe the idol had chosen him. And the more time passed, the more that little piece of wood felt present. And not in a good way. It's strange how the supernatural often doesn't announce itself with a bang. It creeps in quietly, through small details like choosing an object that shouldn't matter. At that point, the protagonist still lived his life as usual, ignoring the subtle signs like how the air grew heavier near the idol, or the way his dreams were becoming darker and more frequent. But if you've ever heard scary stories, you know everything has a beginning. And almost always, that beginning feels ordinary. Until the nights get too long, and the silence begins to speak. As the days went by, a question started to haunt him: where had that idol really come from? The seller had been vague, and any questions asked later led to nothing. It was as if the object had no clear origin, no history. Just one offhand comment that it had been found in an abandoned house out in the countryside, along with other items tied to occult rituals. But who brought it to the market? And why? The questions buzzed in his head like a wasp trapped in a jar. He tried researching similar sculptures and found mentions on obscure forums: haunted objects, cursed items, legends of idols used to imprison spirits. The figure he owned seemed to carry centuries of untold stories. There was a veil over the dark wood, a veil woven from ancient traditions and demonic energy. Some sources warned keeping such an item without a protection ritual could open the door to something else. Something beyond. That's when something even stranger happened. A note appeared, slipped under his door, with no sender. Just one handwritten sentence: "You need to return it before it's too late." He froze. No cameras. No footprints. No signs of a visitor. How did they know about the idol? And return it? Where? It was as if someone else knew the object was cursed. Or maybe it was the idol itself trying to warn him. Or threaten him. Little by little, the idea that this had been a gift from the unknown began to make more sense, and not in any kind way. He realized he had never truly chosen the idol. It had been more like a compulsion, as if he'd been hypnotized at the moment of purchase. A poisoned gift. Left by unseen hands to fulfill a dark purpose. In horror stories, gifts like this never come with good intentions. They come with weight. With pain. With secrets. And this one was just beginning to reveal itself. Ever since the idol arrived at the house, something felt off about the atmosphere, and he started to notice the subtle changes. The room where the idol was kept always seemed colder, even with the windows shut. At times, just walking in made the air feel heavier, like someone had just left or was still standing right there. Passing near the object, he'd feel a chill down his spine, a dry, hard-to-name unease. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a presence. A feeling that something inside that carved wood was watching. Touching it made things worse. The wood, though aged, felt alive. Sometimes warm. Sometimes ice-cold, like it reacted to the mood in the house. Once, when he tried moving it, he was hit by sudden vertigo, like the floor had dropped out from beneath him. From then on, he avoided touching it directly. He used cloths, gloves, anything to put a barrier between them. The discomfort was beyond reason. And yet, the more he tried to avoid it, the more the object seemed to demand his attention. Some nights, he'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding after intense nightmares, always involving the idol. In one, he was tied to a clearing, surrounded by hooded figures holding replicas of the sculpture. In another, the idol had limbs and walked through his bedroom, dragging its claws along the walls. These weren't just dreams. He'd wake up with scratches, bruises, and an unbearable exhaustion. It was as if the curse was feeding on him, slowly. The psychological terror had only just begun. The idol didn't even need to move. Its mere presence was enough. Even his guests began to notice. Some refused to enter the room. A neighbor once said she felt something bad before even ringing the doorbell. After each of these encounters, the idol's presence seemed stronger, as if it fed on fear, curiosity, and energy. Whispers began to spread: a cursed item, a vessel for old spirits. And the more the protagonist tried to ignore it, the more the idol made itself known, like a shadow glued to the soul of the house. The first night was subtle, almost unnoticeable. A creak in the hallway, like someone stepping on a loose floorboard. The protagonist got up, blamed it on wind, old wood, maybe the neighbor's cat. Except there was no cat. No wind. All the windows were shut. Over the next few nights, the sounds grew louder: slow footsteps through the house, as if someone were walking from room to room. Always at the same time, around 3 a.m. The house, once silent, began to breathe with its own life. And it wasn't a welcoming one. Doors started creaking open on their own. One even slammed shut at exactly 2:47 a.m. A time that would repeat during almost every future incident. Books and trinkets were found scattered on the floor. The TV would switch on by itself, always to static, and the room would fill with low whispers. One night, he tried recording the sounds. The audio captured something deeply disturbing, a hoarse, tribal-like chant in a language he didn't recognize. That's when he knew the problem wasn't psychological. It was supernatural. The idol, seemingly motionless, was the epicenter of it all. Every time a sound occurred, it was near the object. One night, he woke to 3 knocks at his bedroom door. He opened it, no one was there. But the idol, which had been in the living room, was now lying on the hallway floor, facing the door. A chill ran through him. He tried to rationalize, to convince himself it was a dream, or a prank. But deep down, he knew something was watching him. And it was becoming more active. Each night brought something new. Something worse. That's when the whispers began. Soft, not loud enough to make out the words, but too clear to ignore. Thin, persistent voices repeating patterns that felt ancient, ritualistic. He started losing sleep. Losing his appetite. Losing track of time. At work, he seemed distant. At home, he couldn't be alone without glancing over his shoulder. The line between dream and reality blurred. Nightmares spilled into the waking world. It was as if the idol wasn't just waking up at night, it was dragging him into its world, a place where fear ruled everything. The first time the idol appeared out of place was subtle. He had left it on the shelf, but in the morning, it was on the living room floor, turned around. Maybe it had fallen? But the angle. The weight. It didn't make sense. He put it back. Tried not to think about it. Days later, it happened again. And again. But this time, the idol showed up farther from where it started. In the bathroom. In the kitchen. And once on his pillow. Like it had been watching him sleep. He started running experiments. He locked the idol in a box, sealed it with tape, and shoved it deep in the closet. The next morning the box was open. No sign of forced entry. And the idol was back on the living room table. He began writing down times, dates, locations. There was no logic. No pattern. Just one cold truth: this wasn't a prank. The house was locked. Cameras installed. No one else around. And still, the idol moved. Each time, more intentionally, as if it wanted to be seen. Noticed. Feared. And it was working. Some nights, he'd jolt awake, breathless, his heart racing, and feel it nearby. And it was. Not in its usual place, but beside the bed. Or in the doorway. Like a wooden sentinel with invisible eyes. He tried filming it, using motion sensors, but the devices always failed. Recordings would corrupt. Sensors triggered nothing. It was as if the entity inside the idol knew how to avoid detection, or worse, was playing with him. Over time, just knowing the idol was in another room was enough to push him toward the edge. The sense of powerlessness of watching something defy physics, logic, reality was unbearable. He began locking doors from the inside, stacking furniture, hiding the idol in absurd places: the oven, the fridge. Once, he buried it in the backyard in the dead of night. But no matter what, the idol always came back. Always. Untouched. In the place it chose. As if silently whispering, "You're not in control." One especially quiet night, everything changed. He woke up with no reason, his body frozen, cold, like he'd just been pulled from a nightmare. Sitting up in bed, it took a moment to realize the idol was standing in the doorway. But something was different. The eye sockets deeper, darker. And he swore. They blinked. Blinked. Paralyzed, unable to scream or move, he could only watch as the little statue turned its head slowly as if recognizing his fear. And that's when he passed out. From that moment on, the apparitions escalated. It wasn't just the idol anymore. Figures began appearing in the corners of the house, shadowy, vaguely human forms, distorted, like broken memories of ancient spirits. One, tall with lifeless eyes, stood in the bathroom doorway for hours. He tried to blink, pray, run. But the figure would vanish just before he acted. As if testing him. Watching. The idol? Always nearby. Like a conductor orchestrating a nightmare. Then came the impossible. One night, he saw it walk. Not float. Not fall. Walk. Small, twisted legs. Wooden feet tapping rhythmically across the tile. The sound a dry, click-click like nails on glass. That's when his grip on reality finally shattered. He ran to his car, spent the night elsewhere, and returned in the morning with friends. Of course, there was no sign of the idol moving. But the trail of scorched wood across the floor remained. They laughed. He couldn't. Disturbing visions began to follow him outside the house. Reflections in mirrors that weren't his own. Strangers with hollow eyes, like the dream figures. Whispered voices in subway stations, murmuring the same word he'd seen on the note, "Return it." The line between delusion and truth vanished. The psychological horror had taken over. He couldn't trust himself anymore. What he saw, what he heard, what he felt, could all be the idol's influence. Or worse, the entity within it. Desperate and on the verge of collapse, he sought help because by now, there was no doubt this was beyond comprehension. The first attempt was with a local priest, a calm, seasoned man who had heard his share of strange stories. But when he saw the idol, he turned pale. He touched it cautiously and muttered, "This isn't just an object. It's a prison." After a short prayer, he refused to keep it in the church. "The evil inside it is ancient," he warned. "And approaching it requires protection." The second try led him to a local healer, an old woman known in the neighborhood for her work with plants, chants, and ancestral symbols. She lived on a hillside, surrounded by herbs and smoke. The moment she laid eyes on the idol, she lit incense and began a cleansing ritual. During the ceremony, she fell into a trance. Her voice changed. She said something that sent a chill through his bones. "The entity has been summoned. And it refuses to be forgotten. You were chosen as guardian. Or offering." At the end, she wept. Told him to leave. "This idol is no longer just an object," she said. Weeks passed as he dove into research, speaking to occultists, reading forgotten books, searching online forums. Some spoke of protection rituals. Others advised burning or burying the object with sacred elements. But one thing was consistent: no one recommended keeping it nearby. Similar cases mentioned trapped spirits, cursed relics, apparitions that led to madness. In one of the oldest texts he found, a symbol carved into the idol matched his exactly. The translation? "The one who awakens every night." There was no easy way out anymore. The curse was active. And removing it wasn't simple. The idol wasn't just a gateway to the supernatural, it was a home. A host. For something evil. Something old. Maybe summoned in some long-forgotten ritual. Maybe just waiting. And the man, he wasn't just a victim anymore. He was part of it now. Part of the story. Part of the curse. And the more he tried to understand, the deeper it pulled him in. His first real attempt to destroy it was fire. He built a bonfire in his backyard, doused the idol in alcohol, and lit a match with trembling fingers. The flames engulfed it, but it didn't burn. The wood darkened, released a foul stench like burnt flesh and rotting moss, but remained whole. The fire died, and the idol seemed to smile. Not with lips but with presence. It had endured. As if it fed on the futility of destruction. As if it enjoyed it. Next, he buried it. Deep in the woods, far from home. He dug a pit, chanted half-remembered prayers, poured salt, drew protection symbols in chalk. He buried the idol beneath layers of earth and stone, feeling a wave of relief. The next morning, he opened the kitchen cabinet. And there it was. Standing. Clean. With that same sweet, rotting smell. As if nothing had happened. Or worse, as if the entity had been angered. The house felt heavier. The nightmares darker. The healer offered to perform a more powerful ritual. It involved herbs, black hen's blood, chants in ancient Tupi-Guarani, and words pulled from forgotten tomes. The ritual lasted nearly 2 hours. Midway, the idol trembled. Visibly. A crack appeared along its side. For a moment, everyone thought the spirit had been banished. But then, the crack sealed. The idol was whole again. One of the assistants vomited blood and never returned. The healer admitted, "I've never seen anything like this. It doesn't want to leave. It wants to stay." As a final effort, he left it at the church steps inside a locked box, with letters explaining everything. Then he vanished for 2 days. When he returned, the box was in his living room. Open. No sign of forced entry. The idol sat on the couch, facing the TV, like it had been waiting. That's when he finally understood this thing couldn't be destroyed. Not by human hands. It was more than a curse. It was a presence ancient, bound to old traditions and forgotten cults. And it didn't just want to stay. It wanted to take over. The final night began like all the others, heavy silence, the clock stuck at 2:47 a.m. and a pounding heartbeat waking him up. But the air felt different, thick with the scent of burned wood and rusted iron. The idol, which had been locked in the basement in chains, now stood in the center of his room. No signs of break-in. The temperature had dropped sharply. He tried to scream. No sound came out. And then, the idol's eyes, now glowing red, opened. The object began to move. Slowly. Its short legs tapping against the floor with a dry, dreadful rhythm. The shadows in the room twisted and writhed, forming claws, arms, mouths. The walls trembled with whispers from other lifetimes, other dimensions. In the mirror, he saw his reflection. Smiling. But his mouth hadn't moved. The entity wasn't just in the idol anymore. It was inside him. Taking his body. Taking his mind. It had waited patiently for this moment to fully awaken. He tried to run, but his limbs wouldn't obey. He was paralyzed. His hands moved on their own, drawing symbols in the air, chanting phrases he didn't understand but that spilled from his lips like prayers in reverse. The world spun. All the lights in the house went out at once. The last thing he saw was the idol sinking into his chest and his final scream, smothered by a raspy laugh that echoed from a bottomless void. Then, silence. When the neighbors entered the next day, the house was empty. No signs of struggle. No signs of him. The idol? Gone. As if it had never been there. But days later, a new antique fair opened in a distant neighborhood. A curious boy stumbled across a small, hand-carved statue among dusty relics. Weird. It looks like it's smiling, he told his mom. And just like that, the cycle restarted. The terror hadn't ended. The spirit, the curse, the entity, whatever it was, had simply found a new host. Because, as horror stories often say, some objects don't want to be forgotten. They want to be found. Since that final night, no one ever saw the man again. His belongings remained in the house: wallet, phone, ID, all untouched. Except him. The police found no clues. Friends who dared enter the house reported an overwhelming pressure, like they were being watched. A priest brought in to bless the place said, "Something still lives here. Something hiding in the walls." In the echoes of the night. The house was sealed. But every night, at 2:47 a.m., a light turns on by itself. Months later, the idol reappeared. It now sits quietly in the display window of a downtown antique shop. Same look: charred wood, strange carvings, hollow eyes, and that unnerving presence. The shop owner says he doesn't know where it came from. "It was just on the shelf when I opened," he shrugs. Since then, several customers have reported chills, strange dreams, and the feeling of being watched. And yet, it remains there, waiting for someone new, curious, careless, to bring it home once more. And so the cycle continues. A possessed object, born from occult roots, carrying an ancient curse that was never broken. Some scary stories end with explanations. Not this one. This one lives on, lurking, waiting for the next touch, the next home. You might think you'd never fall into that trap, that you'd know better. But what if it's already nearby? What if you have something at home that moves on its own, appears in the wrong place, haunts your sleep, and whispers in the night? The idol still exists. And it doesn't need you to find it. It only needs you to notice it. Maybe in a store. A forgotten gift. A box in your attic. And when it's too late, maybe you'll remember this story. Maybe you'll try to warn someone. But how do you warn people when no one believes? What if, by then, the idol is already the one in control? And now, after all that, do you still think some objects are just decoration? Maybe. Maybe not. But tell me, how many times have you ignored that sudden, unexplained chill? How many times have you woken up in the middle of the night, short of breath, convinced someone or something was standing in the dark corner of your room? Maybe what you need isn't an explanation, but attention. Attention to the signs. The sounds. The little warnings that reality gives when something tries to cross over from the natural to the supernatural. This story is a warning, but also a mirror. And if you saw yourself in any part of it, even just a little, don't ignore it. Because psychological horror doesn't start with screams. It starts with silence. With doubt. With that seemingly harmless wooden idol that, for some reason, you just can't throw away. Life is full of mysteries, many hidden in ancient traditions, forgotten symbols, and objects that carry more than just matter. They carry stories, spirits, presences. And the most dangerous thing of all is what seems harmless. So now I ask you, have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? A strange awakening in the night? Found an object that felt wrong? Share your story in the comments. Maybe ITLL helps someone realize they're not alone. If you enjoyed this tale and want to explore more mysteries, psychological horror, and occult lore, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, a new story that might just change the way you see reality. Because who knows? Maybe the next idol awakens in your home.